What's bonkin', everybody, and welcome to Take Your Time, a Persona 5 podcast where we play Persona 5 Royal in real time, along with the in-game calendar dates, even when there are no calendar dates to play along with. My name is Tom Marks, joined, as always, by Jonathan Dornbush.
Tom, we have so much to get into this week. I know. There's just so many activities we got into. It's wild.
We're also joined by returning guest, friend of the show, and deep-seated rival of mine, as you know, Barrett Courtney. Barrett, how are you?
Hi, yeah, there's a lot to get into today, I spent a lot of time with Ryuji. We would hang out on the couch and watch House MD.
Nice, nice.
I'm also, I came back because I heard too much crap talking about the one and only boy, Jose, my sweet summer child, who I love dearly, and I just heard a lot of crap being talked about him, so I felt like I needed to come back here to defend my sweet summer child from this monster named Tom R. Marks.
Well, I'm sure we will have time for that towards the end of the show, but it's a packed one, so we might not get to it. Who knows?
There's a lot happening.
We'll see.
Talking about Jose is like Jimmy Kimmel's like, oh, and apologies to Matt Damon. Didn't have time
Yeah.
for him, so we had to bump him off the couch.
We did that to somebody earlier in the show. Oh, it was the Kasumi, when we were talking about the Kasumi thing for a little bit early on.
Yeah, because I was one of the audience members waiting every week for you guys to finally talk about Kasumi, and you guys would be like, for like a month, being like, we'll get to her next week. It's like, God damn it.
Yeah. I probably made that exact joke back then, too. So, yeah, it's great.
As we talked about, or as we alluded to, we're playing the end of this game dumb because we're following the calendar dates, but there's nothing that happens this week. So instead, we've got a very special episode that a lot of people have been asking for a while that I'm excited to do, which is that we're going to be going through the party members and the palaces and ranking them into trying to come up with a definitive take your time list that is sort of an amalgamation of thoughts of average it out, fight over it. It's like we do this a lot at IGN, right? The arguing over top 10 lists sort of thing. So it's second nature at this point.
It's something that can get posted to the Persona 5 subreddit so that people can be mad at this show, even though they probably didn't know it existed.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect.
Yeah.
This is the exact demographic we're going for. No, but before we get to that, we do have a little bit of housekeeping. First, I had a quiz from last week, which is we talked about all of the women in your life giving you chocolate, and I brought up that one of the people also gives you, assuming you're not dating them, because I don't think they give this to you if you're dating them, one of the other people gives you something else, and I asked, what else do you get from someone on February 15th? Did either of you have thoughts on this? Barrett, it's been a while longer for you.
Well, I haven't finished this last week's episode, and I'm trying to think. So, like, being really put on the spot
something not chocolate related.
Not chocolate related.
You get something else from one of the other people.
And
I didn't see any comments about this.
No, and I didn't write it down, so I have no idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's a little bit of a trick question.
Oh.
Because it's not an actual item. However, Kawakami, after giving you chocolates, gives you a study guide to study for finals.
Oh, right.
So she also is like, here's some chocolate. Thanks so much. I really appreciate you. It's totally casual. And then she's also like, also, here's your study guide. Start your homework. Get on it.
Yeah.
And you're like, Kawakami, I'm working at my cafe job right now. Like, what are you doing?
It's like, you've been in jail for a while. Here's everything you need to know to prepare for finals again.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's actually, that is the exact reasoning, is that you missed a month of school or whatever.
Classic thing that happened to all of us as teens.
Classic Joker.
I just appreciated that you get chocolate from everybody and then also a study guide.
Yeah.
We also had some comments. Jonathan, you want to read some comments?
I can, yes. First of all, Shout out to Jack Attack for finally catching up with the podcast again. We love hearing from everyone we get so many great comments of people being like, I am not on this episode, but I'm just commenting to say I'm enjoying it, but I am 6 months behind because I'm playing with the show. And it's always awesome to get those comments and everything. I did just want to bring up a couple comments. Dexter1 mentioned, I just want to note that I did in fact spend some of my Valentine's Day watching last week's episode before my fiance came home, which I appreciate. Tom and I, of course, were joking about if you decided to spend your Valentine's with us. We appreciate it. So thank you, Dexter, and anyone else who did. Elec in the comments left a larger comment in there that everyone should definitely go check out and read, but I wanted to pull out this fact because I had no idea, and based on your reactions beforehand, it seems like none of us did, and said someone else mentioned this before, to be fair, but Chihaya also charges extra for affinity readings with female confidants over male ones if you romance her.
That's wild.
That's hilarious.
So we have not fact-checked this, but I do not think Elec would lie, and frankly, that is incredible, and what a tiny little detail.
I don't trust anybody more than I trust Elec, so
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure this is true.
Well, you definitely don't trust Tom, so it makes sense. And then last but not least, we got an email in, and of course you can write in by email to dornology@gmail.com. Devin wrote in and said, outside of the Phantom Thieves, Sumire, Maruki, and metaverse-related people like Jose and Lavenza, no one remembers that extra semester as it happened. So I was wondering, what happens to confidants that you maxed during the third semester? Are they still maxed, given that Joker was actually in jail during this time? I'm a bit confused on this. And also said, I remember on the last episode, Jonathan did not remember getting chocolate from Takemi, but said I had maxed her out at some point, was wondering if we had any ideas. I think either I just wrote down my note wrong, or I misremembered. I'm going to have to replay through that sequence when we get to March, so I'll double check then to be sure. But I think it's one of those things where it's kind of like the emotional bonds you created exist outside the reality, I guess, is my explanation.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, like the friendships that you form will never die, even though reality has shifted. Like throughout realities, your friendships will always be tied together, you know?
Well, there is a little bit of weirdness, right? Where like Sojiro, when the gang brings up Joker to Sojiro's like, now that you mention it, I feel like I've been seeing a lot of him lately. So some part of that was still with him?
Yeah. It is definitely an unresolved sort of, I guess, a plot hole. Like, I think you could write it off as, like, yeah, in fiction, because you do end up having bonds, even with, like, Igor, like, his bond never happens on an exact day because you kind of exist outside of time in the Velvet Room. So, I guess,
yeah,
you know.
Or you could be a pro and do all of the confidants before the end of December and not have to worry about that plot hole.
Yeah.
Also, if, like, I mean, how do I put this? I'm not one to, like, you know, just sweep plot holes under the rug.
Sure.
But if there was a universe that I just, like, don't really care about interrogating to the fullest extent of how it makes sense or not, this one I'm okay with just letting some things not make sense.
Where you have, like, a line where Haru literally says, man, all of this is really convenient. It's like, yeah, all right, like, we don't have to think too hard about this.
There is definitely some times where the writing is like, just roll with this, people, please. Like, just let us get through this.
That Futaba section that we talked about right after Sai's Palace and the whole switcheroo thing, where you can just talk to Futaba in your room and just listen to the explanation for all those plot holes, is genuinely incredible. Because it just feels like the people who would point out stuff like this just, like, were annoying the crap out of the developers, and they were like, fine, you know what? For you specifically, here is all this stuff. Nobody else has to listen to it.
Yep, yeah. It's like a lore drop in another game that would have been a text document that you pick up, and, like, you would have... If this were a different game, like, if this were an open world game, you would have, like, read Futaba's journal at some point and learned about it. But yeah, that was very much like, we cover our bases here, but I think it's just kind of like, we did a lot to get the third semester to work enough as it is. Just let us pass on this one. It feels like a little bit.
Yeah, I think the truth of the matter is that the game ends right after it, so you never have to interact with these people again, and we just don't worry about it.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's the truth of it.
Yeah, but that's okay, and I'm not mad about that at all. But we've got a very busy week. We got to get into it, okay?
Of course.
So the first question here, like I said, technically this is the week of February 21st to February 27th, but we don't have anything going on in those days. We will be back next week with more story stuff that happens at the beginning of March, or around, I think it's the end of next week is actually when it occurs. Anyway, so the big question here, the first big question, do we want to start with palaces or party members in terms of ranking?
Oh, I thought you were going to say, do you want to start with what we did this week, just to have a moment of silence?
Yeah, Barrett, last time you pulled up your game and you told us exactly what you did during the week. Did you do that again this time?
No, well, so the thing is when y'all were getting closer and closer to the royal content back in, like, the end of November, and this was also around the time that I was wrapping up Persona 4 Golden for the very first time. So I straight up just started a new playthrough of Persona 5 Royal, binged through it all through December, essentially, and then caught up with y'all by the time January had started. So I put, like, in the matter of, like, 3 or 4 weeks, I'd played, like, 100 hours of this game.
You did the opposite of what we've done. Basically.
Yeah, I did the opposite of what y'all... I essentially have... By the time this show will finish, I will have started and finished 2 playthroughs of Persona 5 Royal, and 1 playthrough of Persona 4 Golden.
I know we're playing slowly, and I know that's, like, kind of the whole point, but when you put it that way...
Yeah.
It's like in the Naughty... Everyone was comparing how The Last Guardian took forever on the PS3, like, that it ended up on the PS4, and people were like, Naughty Dog made, like, 5 games on the PS3 in one generation. How did that happen? It's like, things just happen at different paces.
So nothing to report this week, but I do have a little factoid for y'all for last week, because both of you were wondering about February 14th of what happens if you don't romance anybody and what ends up happening. So by default, right, like, I think it's the night before Valentine's Day. If you're dating anybody, they'll text you. If you're dating several people, you can kind of choose of, like, who am I going to hang out with tomorrow, essentially. And then there's one option that is don't text anybody back.
Yeah.
So you can choose that. I think that option is the default option for Valentine's Day if you don't date anybody. Right. And that's the option where it's a day with the boys and you hang out with Ryuji, Morgana, and Yusuke. And It's great. And you just have a nice, good old day with the boys. And you got to love it.
That is always the default. I should have just assumed. Because that's also what happens in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And that's also what happens, I think, somewhere else. Oh, at the school festival or whatever.
Oh, yeah. That makes so much... I can't believe we didn't think of that at all, but that makes the most sense in the world. Yeah.
So, if you want to go on a date with Ryuji, you can.
Yeah.
It's just got to be a little bit headcanon,
well, thank you for that. I wonder, if you don't text anyone back and you just hang out with Ryuji and Yusuke, do the girls you are dating still come over and beat you up? Because I think there's some line about how they, like, saw you through the window the day before.
Yeah.
And so, like, they just see you hanging out with Ryuji and then come in the next day and beat you up.
You spent Valentine's with a cat and not me?
I can see it. Yeah,
and half of them know that cat is sentient?
Yeah.
Like...
some of them know that you were talking to that cat. The other half are just like, why was he just hanging with the cat?
Yeah.
Oh, God. But Tom, to answer your question in terms of, like, where we should start, I'm torn because Barrett and I were talking about this before the show. I feel like palaces will be easier.
Okay.
I feel like we will more likely agree on palaces by and large than we necessarily might with confidants. I think we also need to, like...
Okumura number 1, I agree.
Of course, yes, naturally. It's really Okumura and Kaneshiro just edging for that number 1 spot for me.
Yeah.
But I think other than that, we also need to make sure we have the parameters for what we're putting forth the confidant ranking for. Because palace, I think it's, like, pretty obvious of, like, how you enjoy it. But confidants, it's like, do we take into account... I assume we're taking into account how they are, like, the story of that confidant line and their powers. Are we also considering, like, how they are in combat, how they are in the general story? Are we doing, like, everything, or?
I was taking it as just a holistic sort of, like...
That works for me.
The character, their usefulness, their confidant arc, their non-confidant line arc, right? Like, I want to rank these characters. Cool. Yeah, let's do palaces first. Okay, so we both have kind of a sense of how we feel, but what we're trying to do here is get an actual sort of merged list, as all great relationships do with compromise, and figure it out. So what jumps out to you, I guess, to start, as like top of the list, bottom of the list stuff, you know?
Yeah, that's a good call. And I think for those listening at home, I think it's like Tom and I are going to have our picks. We also want to hear Barrett's picks because Barrett has done rankings with these before. And then for the show, I think it's going to be like Tom and I compromising, and Barrett being sort of the veto tiebreaker.
I'm the judge.
Exactly.
And
jury
of
and
course,
executioner.
As with all ranking opinion-y things like this, these are our opinions.
It's fact.
They do not invalidate yours. If you like something or dislike something more or less than us, that's great, and we're totally for you.
No,
but,
to quote
yeah.
Eugene from the Try Guys, I'm right, you're wrong, shut up.
Yeah.
or that.
Or that.
We
No.
have different styles of podcasts.
No, it's very much, this is ours. Obviously, we want to hear everyone's in the comments, like where you rank these things, because we know people have been asking for this for a while. But to answer your question, Tom, for me, near the top, just like a couple, I think, very much Futaba and Size are both up there for me.
Interesting. The first conflict arises.
Interesting. I not necessarily like the top two, but those are like up there for me of interest.
Yeah.
And I think Maruki's might be. I'm dealing with recency bias in a way that you're not, but I really did like that palace and the way it was integrated into the story.
Okay. Yeah. That's fair. I mean, I think Maruki's is a good palace. Yeah, definitely.
On the bottom side of the list, Okumura and Kaneshiro are kind of just
Sure.
What? No.
And here's a question that we're also including.
Yes.
We are including Mementos as its own palace, but not Mementos, but like the end Mementos palace when you're like going towards the
When you got to do the floor puzzles. And
yes, exactly. Yeah. But not including just normal grindy Mementos.
So that's tough because that is like one of my favorite puzzles in the game, and then the rest of that palace is kind of whatever.
Yeah.
So that would probably be somewhere in the middle. I would say like the early ones for me, I really don't know where to put Cheetos as well, because I think depending on the day, I could argue that I love it or that I hate it.
That's fair. Because I like Cheetos.
I think it's... Go ahead.
Cheetos Palace to me is just kind of the quintessential like distillation of what the game should or could look like. It is just very like archetypical in the same way that like I think Kamoshida's palace is really good too, but it's just sort of like the intro palace, right? Like it is Shido's palace feels like Kamoshida's palace, but a little bit more evolved. In that it's just sort of like straightforward. It's not doing anything crazy, but there's good puzzles, there's good combat, there's interesting little scenes here and there.
Great music.
Great music.
Very good music.
Yeah.
So for me, and you mentioning Kamoshida, like that one very much for me is like middle of the road, because as you said, I think it's a really great intro, but it's also very standard. But there's nothing about it that's wild, but I do think it is an excellent opening one.
So are we basing these rankings off of just like what the palace does itself? Are we also including the story into that as well, of like these characters that these palaces are based around on, the boss fights and stuff like that? So
I feel like that has to come into play.
Yeah.
To a certain extent.
Because I would make an argument that like Kamoshida is higher because of that, because he is such a strong intro villain. I think like a lot of like his story and like his boss fight, I think carries a lot of like what makes that, for like, even though it is an introductory, you're doing a lot of tutorialization in that palace, it takes a little bit to get going. Once you get in there, that was, when I was at IGN, when we got Persona 5, the original game, I was assigned to play that game for clips and stuff, and I was like not stoked, because I was like, I haven't played a JRPG since like Chrono Trigger with my babysitters, like when I was like 5 or 6, and then playing through that and then getting to the end of Kamoshida's palace, I was like, holy, this game is dope as heck. And so, sorry, I'm trying not to swear. But Yeah, and so I would make that argument for Kamoshida, just like it. Even though, like in retrospect, like looking through the rest of the palaces, I could see why it would be mid tier. But I would make the argument that it's because it makes such a great first impression, it should be a little higher.
Yeah, I like it in the mid to top half of the top half of the list. That
feels
fair.
fair. Yeah, for sure. Well, so what are your general feelings, Tom?
Okay, so I agree. I think Futaba is up there.
Mm-hmm.
I would Futaba's is a very, very good palace, I think. This thing I'm torn on is size.
Mm-hmm.
Size Palace I love stylistically, and I love the vibe of in a lot of ways, and also I think a lot of the things that you're doing there are pretty tedious and dumb. Like, I don't really enjoy the, like, I don't know. I don't really enjoy the pacing of it, that it's like, go to this room and do this thing, now go back out and go to this room and do this thing, and like wander around in the dark now, and then it's like, go do this
I would argue
arena.
that, like, people always talk about the mouse sequence in Cheetah's Palace. I would argue that the dark hallway sequence is worse.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I think for me, the thing about the two of them is like not even the mouse sequence in Cheetah's Palace. It's just more so the endless hallways inside. But I would say that its highs are higher. I think it's tough, because I also think with Size Palace, the fact like where it comes in the story is so cool. Like the fact that it is that the intro boosts it. But I totally get what you're saying.
I think that definitely gives it some extra points in terms of like its position in the story and how it's used in like a very different way, right? That you don't change the heart, and that you get caught on the way out. It's like, all that stuff is really interesting. So I'm not like advocating for it at the bottom. I just didn't think it was like, I'm more torn on it than just like outright loving it.
No, I mean, I think
there are parts of it I love.
Yeah, I think you're convincing me in it, because it is like the high points of it are really, really good, and like you said, I think it's one of the best stylistically. But in terms of what you do in the palace, it's kind of whatever. Like it doesn't live up to some of the other things.
Well, I guess what I'll say is also the first section is more interesting than the second, right?
Yeah.
Like the part where you have to like go behind the scenes in the dice game and go behind the scenes in the slot machines, like that stuff is more interesting to me than like the darkness and the arena that follows. It feels like the second half, that like high roller floor, is basically just like, there's not really much palace there.
Yeah.
You know?
That's fair.
Yeah.
So maybe that's mid-tier?
Yeah, mid is fine for me, kind of how I'm feeling on that.
Okay.
I think one of the things we could probably do really quick is determine the bottom.
We could. We also have not mentioned, I think we have, well, I have mentioned a couple that you obviously didn't talk about, but I think we will with the bottom. We have not mentioned one entirely.
Madarame?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know how I feel about it. The real part.
I like it. It's
I like it too.
Like, yeah.
I kind of just forget about it.
Yeah, it's in that weird sort of in between, right, where it's super early in the game, and so it just sort of like blends in a little bit after you've played all the rest. But it does have really cool parts to it.
Yeah, I like it stylistically, especially in that like second half where you're going through like there's the puzzle, trying to figure out which is the right painting, and you're going through like all the different stairs.
Yeah.
Where it's all like warped and twisted. I also just love like the kind of like museum intro part as well. That is like, you have to remember, like that is the first moment where you, like that is your first Phantom Thieves mission, where you're joined together as like, you know, this is like what you guys are doing. This isn't just like a getting back at your gym teacher kind of thing. And you feel like Phantom Thieves because you're also like stealing something from a museum. And so that's something that I do really hold dear. I do think of like a lot of like what you do in that palace. Like, I don't love like going into the paintings and trying to figure out like, oh, we got to go through the middle of this painting to get to the next paint. Like those little puzzles.
Oh yeah, that room
never really stood out to me. But I do like a lot of those fights. I also really like Madarame's boss fight as well. I didn't love it the first time I played it, because that is definitely like a difficulty check for you. Is his boss fight, but like doing it multiple times at this point, like I do really like the strategy of that fight, and I do like the Royal Edition where he's making copies of himself. So yeah.
But Tom, you were saying we should address the bottom of the list because I feel like we can get our ranking pretty good from the bottom to the top. Probably.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna do a controversial thing here, maybe.
Okay.
I think Kaneshiro is a much worse palace than Okumura.
Other than the music, I think I agree with you.
Ooh.
I have never enjoyed that palace because for me, the thing about it is, don't get me wrong.
Barrett is freaking out.
For
right
anyone watching,
now.
only listening to the audio version.
I'm trying not
please
to
go.
like actually shout in the microphone to not like
So-
make people's ears bleed.
For me, my thing with Kaneshiro versus Okumura is other than the flipping switch part, which is terrible, but I have been lucky both times and just accidentally get through it in like one go. I've never had a problem with it. I don't really mind that palace. And like I don't think it's great, but I generally have enjoyed the vibe of it. I think Okumura, it really comes down to, I think I don't love either of these, but I
do think Okumura's improvements in Royal as well definitely outshine. I don't remember any
what are they
major changes in Kaneshiro.
Other
well, like
than the boss
Okumura's like
battle.
a lot of
The boss fight changed a little bit. Basically, the palace stayed the same.
yeah, like the Okumura one, it's like the switching, like going through like the space like air tunnel things.
Yeah.
That got shortened a lot. Like I think the pacing of Okumura in Royal, like the palace is definitely better. And then you can make arguments about like if you like the boss fight or not. A lot of people don't.
If this was
Whereas
basic,
like
Okay,
Kaneshiro is like there's like very minor changes, and so I think in comparison it just doesn't stand out as much. So I do understand why y'all would put it at the bottom.
I guess this is the elephant in the room we really quickly have to address.
yes.
The Okumura boss fight is the worst thing in this entire video game.
I would argue against that sentiment.
Okay.
And now that we can talk about it because y'all have finally played the Royal
this was
content.
before you-
I forgot. I remember your take on this.
I think Okumura is a really good. It's definitely a difficulty check. That is like if you go in not expecting anything, like playing Royal for the first time when there's no guides and you're playing it for review and you're speeding through the game and you get to this boss fight and you're like, why did this change this way? It is definitely a difficulty curve in a major way, but I do think it is a slight tutorialization of Maruki's first phase boss fight. You have to kind of focus on getting things down all at once to be able to put major damage into Maruki's persona. Whereas it's very the Okumura boss fight is definitely very similar, and like you gotta knock all of those. You have to be very strategic of baton pass, hitting the buffed enemy twice in the same turn, all of that stuff, and I think it gets you in a good headspace of like, especially if you're over leveled or something, and Persona isn't the most difficult game, so if you're going through this kind of like not thinking about strategy, like I was in this most recent playthrough because I was playing on New Game Plus, so I had a lot of OP weapons, so I was like not thinking about the strategy a lot in fights, and that Okumura fight, even on my third time replaying this game in New Game Plus, where I was like, all right, now I got to start thinking about the strategy of things, and I think that helps you a lot with in the game later down the line.
I think, Tom, I remember us having that conversation of basically like if the game just said anything to telegraph that you would need to have this sort of strategy going in, we would have been so much more okay with that boss fight. Because I think like I think to Barrett's point, it is a fun thing to figure out if you know you need to figure it out. If you don't know and you're finding it out in the moment, it sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it's both things are true.
Yes,
if that makes sense.
Totally.
I think everything Barrett you just said is absolutely 100% correct. And also, I think that it should have taken 3 turns for them to refresh their health instead of 2.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
Totally.
I think there's both things there where it's like it is a frustrating fight.
Yeah.
That also teaches you really good lessons you're gonna need in later in the game.
Yeah, it's like it does that, but then also, the easiest difficulty to play it on is hard for whatever, or super hard for whatever
Right.
reason. Because they even admitted, the balancing in that boss fight is just kind of all over the place for whatever reason.
For
Yeah.
me, the thing
But-
is, Kaneshiro, it's just boring. Like
That's what I was gonna say. I was gonna say the exact same thing.
Like the music is great. The music is it is legitimately an awesome music track. But I don't enjoy anything about that palace, and I think that boss fight is so simplistic because he's just a sponge. Like even with the new edition, there's a slight bit of strategy, but I knocked down those like 2 new enemies that were defeating him in 1 round, and it didn't mean anything. Like for me,
it is cool. It is cool visually that he's a fly in this giant robot pig, right?
Yes.
Like that's neat.
Yeah, like, I don't like the slander against Piggytron. You're gonna call Piggytron boring?
Oh.
Like Piggytron is the most, like realized villain in this entire game.
Yeah,
okay, Piggytron is the absolute best, and I love him, and I need a model of him at some point.
That's the thing, though, is I want to feel that for a character called Piggytron. I want to feel the love for that, and I just don't. I just go through that palace.
It's so ridiculous, and like I think not even just the boss fight, like definitely this time around, it's just a bank, like the thing with the thing with like the art museum, right, is like it's like it slowly turns from like a normal looking art museum for the most part, even though all the paintings are of Madarame's students and not actual like portraits of things. You slowly get like it becomes more and more twisted throughout the entire thing. Similar to the Futaba's palace, and then right in the middle of that you have this palace where it's like it's a bank, and it never goes anywhere. Like, it just continues being a bank. Like, I like the idea when you get down into the vault area that, like, Makoto figures out the very obvious thing that, like, it's a key lock that you're opening. And, like, that's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Visually, it doesn't look cool, though. Like, it looks like a vault. And
it only looks
like, there's
cool
nothing interesting
when you're pulled back looking at it shift is basically the only... I would say the 2 things that palace has going for it are the music and Makoto's transformation, because her calling Johanna is fantastic. So I am torn. I legitimately...
Best Awakening.
Those are 2 things
good.
I love so much in this game, but also the
Yeah.
rest of that palace I could forget exists.
Yeah, and one of the things that we should specify here is that just because something is at the bottom of a list doesn't mean we hate it necessarily, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's the same thing once we get into the party member ranking, where it's
yeah.
like, somebody's going to be last, but that doesn't mean we dislike
We still love
that
all of our
character.
children. Yeah, like on my
yeah.
personal ranking, like I did it on a tier maker list, and like my personal lowest palace was at rank C. Like, I didn't hate it, but it's just, something's got to be at the bottom.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's the thing. I think Tom and I, we don't hate Kaneshiro. It's just kind of boring compared to everything else in the game. But so, are we going with Kaneshiro at the bottom then?
I want to go with Kaneshiro at the bottom.
Okay. We're both agreed on it. So Kaneshiro at the bottom. Is it then Okumura second to last? Or do you have another?
Okay.
Oh.
I would even argue that the Mementos Palace is below Okumura. And one of the reasons I have to offer justification for this.
Sure.
I like the space.
I like the space.
You sound like someone turning
so
down
this
an
is my
apartment.
counter argument to the space, is that it's similar to the bank stuff, because it's more exciting than a bank because it's space. But again, visually, like, they don't do a lot with it. It just feels very like, yeah, this guy was a huge fan of like Star Trek when he was a kid, and this is like his idea of like what space is. And it's just like, I don't like the song, the palace song I find really annoying, especially like when you're spending a lot of time getting through certain segments, and it's just like over and over again.
Oh, that's true. Okay, actually, just for that, we can put it lower.
Like, it doesn't do anything, and like
You just reminded me of that music, and I went, oh, wait.
Yeah, and then like the alternate track isn't any better.
I'm of the very minority opinion, I think, that even that jumping through space button puzzle, like, I don't dislike that.
I don't dislike it. I don't
hate it as much
remember
as-
the original version, though, and I do remember disliking the original version. But yeah,
Sure.
going through Royal, it's like, yeah, it takes me maybe another minute to like kind of figure it out, but I'm also trying to go everywhere to unlock a chest to get the will seed and all that
there's a
stuff.
will
So
seed
it's like,
in
I
one
don't
of those, so-
mind like going through that.
I just remember patron saint of the podcast, Andrew Goldfarb, telling me that, like, most people fall off of Persona in Okumura's Palace at that section because it's frustrating. Like, he was like, I've known multiple people who stopped playing at that button puzzle and just keep pressing forward because it gets better after that. And I got to that section and I had to, like, double check with him that was the section he was talking about because I, like, didn't mind it.
I feel like more people probably dropped off where I originally dropped off, which is the Madarame boss fight. When I first played Persona 5, I was not doing well with the Madarame boss fight and then stopped playing for 6 months, and then I was like, I should go back to that game, and then had to like speed run through it to decide what my game of the year was that year. So that's interesting.
So it sounds like we are going Kaneshiro as bottom,
Okumura,
and Okumura after that.
And then I'm cool with Mementos after that because I love that puzzle, but other than that, it's not like it's just not really a palace to me. Like it.
I need to bring up the music for it because I remember liking the music, but I can't. Mementos.
Well, I'm a little biased on this playthrough though, because we talked about this when we went through the palace, that during this playthrough, like, I didn't do like a single fight in that entire palace, and so it was like very quick.
Neither did I. So it's yeah.
I kind of like that though. Like, I kind of like where I just get to like speed through it, and
it's fun.
And I didn't get to do it this time around because I was doing New Game Plus, and I was definitely like I was over leveled for most of the game, which meant I wasn't doing a lot of Mementos level grinding. So that was, I think, the first palace where I was like, oh, I don't get to just like run through the palace anymore. So that was an interesting kind of like. Kind of power check for me, but it was like going through it beforehand. Like, I remember playing Royal for the first time, and I loved that I was over leveled. I was like, yeah, like I think the Royal version, I think definitely gets held up for people who played the original version first, because it's like you remember the final palace being like this holy crap, like I gotta get through this, we gotta fight everybody kind of thing if you're just playing it normally, and then being able to get to it again in the Royal where you're more than likely over leveled and you get to just like run through all of those enemies. I kind of adore that, but I do get of like, because of that you don't get to spend a lot of time there.
Yeah, it's I also just think, like, on an aesthetic level, it's cool for what it is doing there, but it does very much bleed together to me. But Barrett, for those listening, is driving to the music.
I'm gonna send y'all the link. Listen to it when you can, because it is it's a groovy little tune. I love it.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, we're looking at Mementos as possibly bottom, the third from the bottom. What are we looking at in competition with it then?
Right. I mean, I think the answers are basically like this middle section, right? This middle bottom is like Madarame, maybe Shido, maybe, like that sort of grouping.
Are we considering Kamoshida in there, or thinking of him a little higher? Because it is
Kamoshida, I would do a little higher than this. But
what about Sai?
I don't know. Sai, I'd put... I know I'm in the unpopular opinion on this. I'd put Sai more in the middle, I guess, not this low or anything.
Okay.
I guess this is the way I would determine this for me. Mementos, this feels low for the Mementos Palace in terms of how much I actually enjoyed it. But of the other 6 that we haven't fit in the list, Kamoshida, Madarame, Sai, Shido, Maruki, and Futaba, I wouldn't put any of those below it.
That's kind of where I'm at too. It's, again, we're in that place of like, we didn't dislike it. It's just compared to everything else, we liked it more.
All those other things I would put above it. Yeah. So then just by kind of default, it ends up there.
That works for me. Barrett, does that sound crazy to you, or are you?
No, that sounds fair.
Okay.
I accept it.
So continuing up, because we are over the halfway mark now of the show, of this episode with nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
Where are we going next? Because that was what I was saying, is about like the Madarame Kamoshida sort of world.
Yeah.
Unless you wanted to go like Maruki or something lower like that, or Shido, I don't know.
It's really tough for me, because I think you have a placeholder for one, and I think we're probably on the same point there, and I don't want to say it yet, but I think we're probably there.
Okay.
It's really hard for me right now. I think After your argument, I'm torn, I think right now between Madarame and maybe Maruki. Not that, like, Maruki, Madarame, and Sai for me are kind of like, where do I put these three in the middle at the moment? I think I would probably go Madarame at 6, this would be. Sai at 5, and Maruki at 4. So right now, if you just like, right now, Joker's gun to my head and I had to decide, I would do those, and then I would do Kamoshida, Shido, and then Futaba at number 1, is how I would do it.
Okay.
Not to, like,
Madarame,
speed through.
Yeah. Well,
But-
that's fine. Sai there? Yeah.
Because I'm like really attached to, again, it might be recency bias, and Barrett, I'm curious to hear what you think, but like I really like what the Maruki Palace does and the way it's integrated into the story and the way you keep coming back to it, unfolding a little bit more of it, and the puzzle sort of like questioning. I did agree, like the pacing of needing to listen to everyone for those morality questions was a little annoying, but I thought that was a really cool concept.
Yeah.
So
on
it feels like-
replay, that it definitely felt slower this time around. I remember the first time experiencing that puzzle being like, oh, this is really cool, but
Yeah,
it takes its time.
Let's run this down as what we have as the temp list right now, and then we can finalize or make any changes. And Barrett, you can chime in and if you think we're crazy on anything here. So right now we've got it as number 1 Futaba, then 2 Shido, 3 Kamoshida, 4 Maruki, 5 Sai, 6 Madarame, 7 Mementos, 8 Okumura, and 9 Kaneshiro. And I think the big standout here is that probably most people would say Sai and Shido are flipped. Is that...
So
yeah.
Does that feel like maybe the way that...
So for my personal list,
Yeah.
I'll finally reveal
Yeah,
this since y'all are kind of closing in on a take your time ranking here. So mine, it goes from 9 up. So at number 9, I have Okumura. Number
Sure.
8, I have Kaneshiro.
Okay, so we aren't like wildly off
It's
there.
not too off. It's not
Yeah.
too off.
So
which, I
Kaneshiro should be number
appreciate.
2. Here's why.
And like I don't like I totally understand your arguments of like why those are flipped compared to mine. Number 7, I have Madarame. 6, I have Mementos.
Okay.
5, I have Shido. 4, Kamoshida. 3, Sai. 2, Futaba. 1, Maruki.
You have one Maruki at 1.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I'm really I was trying to put Maruki a little lower out of like recency bias because I'm sitting with it having just been fresh off the like emotional, torment of all that. I think it's I could see it maybe being above Kamoshida for me, like in the top 3, and then Shido and Sai are, like, you really convinced me earlier on. I think like if we were going at it just an aesthetic and like a story level, I would put Sai higher because I just
We can put her higher though for that because it is the casino look is really cool, right? Especially compared to something like the cruise ship, which is not overly like I'm apparently a masochist and I like the mouse puzzles, but as you said, the fact that it's just like endless series of hallways is not like great.
Yeah.
I
think if that palace were a little shorter, I would have it higher. But even though I originally, with this Joker gun to my head, said Shido at 2, I think like that was just sort of from the conversation. But the more I think about it, I'd put it a little lower, probably.
Okay.
And maybe, man, it's really. Where did you have Kamoshida again, Barrett? Just out of curiosity.
I had him at number 4. Like I said earlier, I think he's a great starter one. He's a great first villain. I like the castle aesthetic is a very unique one. I feel like compared to everything else.
Yeah.
But just like I don't think it hits those same emotional highs as my top 3, which are Maruki, Futaba, and Sai.
Gotcha.
Maruki is really high for me because I think similar to. I think that it was a write-in from last week's episode. Someone wrote in talking about it was their first time playing Persona 5 ever, and they played the royal content, and that was like their first experience with it, and they really liked where Maruki's palace was placed because it felt like, okay, you have this emotional, like, personal story going on with Joker and Shido, and then you do, like, kind of typical anime bullshit where you go fight God, and it just felt like, all right, like, this doesn't feel really personal anymore, and then it brings back to, like, you're fighting against this adult, one of the very few adults that you trusted who was betraying that trust. And that was kind of like one of my biggest problems with the original game, is that, like, I loved the, like, kind of last couple of hours of Persona 5 and, like, just the cutscenes, how it ends, how everything wraps up, but I was initially really disappointed of, like, that being the last palace. So, like, the fact that they were able to bring it back to an emotional story and a more personal story for the group to wrap things up, I really adored. And I love Maruki as a character. I do think he's the best character in all of the kind of Persona 5 universe.
And we have to have this convo with you and Tom after we play Strikers, because obviously Tom has said on the show that he loves the Strikers characters more. So I
think they get more hype moments than Maruki does. I will agree on some aspects, but Maruki, I think, is a fantastic foil to Joker in a different way that Akechi is a fantastic foil to Joker. And I just really adore that. So
and
also the performance of Maruki, especially, you know, when you're just punching each other and he's screaming like, "Why Rumi?" and he just, like, at the end where he's just screaming and falls to the floor. I forget who the actor is, but that actor deserved all of the nominations for that performance.
How are you feeling about the list, Tom? Just to Futaba number 1, which we should mention why, but Futaba, Maruki, Shido, Kamoshida, Sai, Madarame, Mementos, Okumura, Kaneshiro. How are you feeling?
So I flipped some around there.
I saw, yeah.
Yeah, I moved up Maruki, I moved down Shido a little bit. I basically moved Maruki above Shido Kamoshida.
Yeah.
Honestly, this feels good to me from my personal perspective. It's not like any of our stuff was very far off from Barrett, what you had, right, in terms of, like, sense checking. Your bottom 2 were the same, the 2 above that were the same, just flipped for both of those, and then the top 5 is similarly just sort of shuffled around. I
can see the argument still for Futaba, because Futaba's palace was my favorite in the original version. And it was only lowered because of Maruki and just how personal that feels to me, because I love not just the story stuff with Maruki's palace, but I really like the weird clean aesthetic of that palace. I really like the music, the creepy looking shadow design, which are also, like, they foreshadow who the palace ruler is when you first go to it, and he's got the hair of Maruki. I love how weird that palace is as well. And I do like the puzzles, like we were mentioning earlier.
It's a good palace. To me, it's a good palace obfuscated by how many times you have to go there.
It does, like, get into the tutorialization a little bit again, kind of like what Kamoshida's palace does a little bit.
Right. And so that's, like, a little annoying to me, but also, like, it's not a deal breaker or whatever. And I do like the aesthetic, like you were saying. I think it means a lot to the story. Definitely feels like it means more to the story than Shido's, although, again, Shido has that boiler room scene where it's just, like, breaks your heart. So it's also got that going for it.
One
of the things, I don't know, one of the things we didn't really talk about is why we like Futaba the most. Which is, personally for me, I think it is emotionally a really good story. I think mechanically that palace works really well, works better in Royal even, because it's got, like, more little things here and there. I really like the scope and scale of it. I like that you have to leave to go to that town first is, like, very weird and different in the context of palaces. I like this. I love the structure of it, that it's this stairway that was open to you to start, and then you have to, like, get kicked out of it and then slowly open those doors back up. And I like that kind of how that ties to Futaba's mental state and what that means about her. Basically, the only part of that palace I don't actively like are like the insta-kill abilities, which is just sort of a general gripe, right? That's not the palace specifically. That's just the first time you get to a point where somebody can just like auto kill you because Anubis has all those mudos or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's not, again, that's just like, I just think insta-kill abilities are dumb generally, not like specifically to that palace.
Yeah, they're so unfair to you, and then like when you try to equip them and use them, they like it feels like it barely works, which is why I never keep Mudo abilities.
Yeah, for me. Sorry.
And then the other part of it that I was going to say is that I don't like is just like that lead up to the boss, and the boss is kind of like a little bit thematically great, but a little bit mechanically weird, I guess is the way to put it.
The boss is a little bit
where
more
you have to go into that room and you like there's a bunch of more shadows to fight and stuff.
Yeah.
Which you can skip in Royal, which I do appreciate. Like if you get to a certain point in that room, there's a thing that Joker can hook onto, and you just skip the rest of the room. Which I think they like because that room is in the original in Persona 5 base, and so I think they probably knew of like we don't want to get rid of this room because it is like thematically and aesthetically like really cool, but if people don't want to like deal with this before they get to this kind of like very guided boss fight, maybe we can just let them skip it. Which I do appreciate.
No, totally. And I echo everything Tom says. I think for me it's the best balance of what makes a great palace a palace here. It's thematically, narratively, like personally and emotionally and mechanically, I think the best all around. And as you were saying, Tom, like it really hits on a level where, as we talked about on the show, but as you're getting through and you feel like you have the palace pattern down, and then you get this totally different kind of palace, and it's just really meaningful in a great way. And I love Futaba's Palace. And
it kind of tells the like story of its palace ruler a little bit better than the Maruki one in that the fact that part of the Maruki Palace just has you like go into a room and watch an unrelated cutscene to what's like is like a little bit blunt. You know what I mean? Like I get it, and I like how it ties into his story as a whole and the palace as a whole. But like, I appreciate the way it's woven into Futaba's Palace a little bit more.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. For me, with Maruki, I appreciate what they had to try to do because they couldn't really give any time to build up or build out any of that backstory for him in the rest of the story. So they had to you don't really get any time outside of the palace to really know who he is. Whereas like when you go into Kamoshida's palace, you know he's a piece of shit, and you learn some extra like things of like why he's a bad person. But like when you go into that palace going after Kamoshida, you know why the way he is, and like he is a dirtbag. Whereas like Maruki, there's still this kind of mystery of like, why are you doing this? And then like the slow reveal of things that he is locked away to hopefully never show anybody. I really loved that. And I think in the moment it does come off really blunt of like, hey, you're watching this cutscene essentially right now of his memories. But I kind of thematically in the way they kind of had to weave it in because they couldn't spend too much time outside of the palace building that up. So they're like, how do we do it in the palace? For me, works really well.
So I fully agree. But you want to talk about plot holes real quick. Why are the tapes in Maruki's mind moments from his memories in third-person camera perspective, huh? Why aren't they from his eyes? Why aren't they first person? He wouldn't know what he looked like from the third person in those moments.
Tom, have you never had an out-of-body experience dream, you know?
I actually kind of know.
Oh, well,
that's
I have those topic. A lot. Yeah, that's a different podcast for us. But yeah, I'm
forget everything you know is what I'm going to say to that.
No, totally.
Real talk. The first time I loaded up one of those tapes, the first time I played through Royal, the first thing I thought of was like, wait, why is it like a camera on him? Like, how would he know this? Like,
just don't think about it. Just don't think about it.
Yeah, just don't think about it.
That's fine.
I personally have him at number one as well. Just like Futaba, I absolutely adore. I do think she's not just her palace. I do think she is probably tied for best character in the game overall with Maruki. a lot of like what Maruki goes through and like a lot of the things that he lost and how that gets revealed, like definitely was stuff that I was not expecting and like punched me in the gut in ways that I don't think I can still quite comprehend to this day. And that was similar with like the first time playing Futaba's Palace. So I do think Maruki has a leg up for me personally just because of like recency bias, where I've known Futaba's story for the last 5 years at this point. But yeah, Futaba, I definitely understand like having it at number one because her story's so relatable. The way it's structured as well is like very similar to how like Persona 4's dungeons are kind of handled, where it's less about going after bad people and more about like helping people who are struggling with themselves. And I like how her palace feels so different from the rest of it because of that. And I think that's why it stands out so much, because you're not going after someone who is evil. They're so distorted in what their views are.
Yeah.
And like I brought up on the episode that I was on 8 months ago or whatever at this point, of like her distortion is so strong it bleeds into the real world, and you don't see that very often. The only two other times you see it is when Mementos fuses with the real world, and then when Maruki takes over Mementos and can kind of control that. So
Right.
I love that little tidbit of just like how strong her distortion is.
AKA Futaba could have been a Maruki if we let it happen. Who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm cool with this ranking if you're good with it. I like it.
Yeah.
I'm happy with it.
I think I'm cool with it too.
Okay.
I think again, this is just these are just our opinions, man. And and once more, I think that you could absolutely split hairs over certain
Yes.
this and that and that. Sai being at 5 is not a condemnation that Sai's Palace is terrible, right? It is just that like we like these other ones more than it.
Yeah.
And I think that there's even arguments, right, like that, Kamoshida could be higher or lower, Shido could be higher or lower. I just really like those palaces too, and I like about where we have them.
Me too.
The judge, jury, and executioner bangs his gavel and says he's cool with it.
Awesome.
Cool.
Perfect.
Great.
Well,
so that final ranking, just to go over it, is currently number 1, Futaba, number 2, Maruki, number 3, Shido, number 4, Kamoshida, number 5, Sai, number 6, Madarame, number 7, Mementos, number 8, Okumura, and number 9, Kaneshiro.
we did it.
Because I like the space.
I'm in love with the space here. It's really
I like the space.
So it's really good space.
I really like
So-
that I started that conversation being like, this will be a real quick one. The
Yeah,
palace
that's
will
an
be
easy
simple.
one.
Yeah, that's the easy. I feel like Confidants probably won't be as hard as I'm thinking.
Well,
Well, it's not even.
I mean,
We just got
Or
party members.
yeah,
here.
party members. Excuse me. Yeah.
at this point, the question is: we are an hour into the show, and do we Jimmy Kimmel it and save it for next week?
It's a good question. Yeah.
If anything, I can give my personal rankings, and then y'all can bicker next week about it. About where you guys.
I do like that
put
as a
it.
cliffhanger because we could potentially be here for another hour. You're totally right.
Yeah. And we've got to fill the next couple weeks with something.
So let me pull up my list here, because my tier list is like all of the characters, so I gotta like kind of hand pick out the party members here. So I think at the bottom, and again, this is like, you gotta, if you're ranking your children, someone's just gotta be at the bottom. And I will say on this tier maker list, where the top is S tier and the bottom is F minus. This party member is at B. So like just remember that. Mm-hmm. Don't be upset when they're at the bottom. So at bottom, I have Yusuke.
How could you?
I'm hiding
and then
my face.
Next up, I have Sumire, Haru, Joker himself. I know he's not a party member, but I just really like him as a protagonist. Morgana, on a surprising one, Makoto, Akechi, Ryuji, Futaba. And that is my ranking. Futaba being at the top, Yusuke being at the bottom.
I don't think that's like so far off from what I personally had, but
And all three of Futaba, Ryuji, and Akechi are all at S tier. Makoto was at the top of A tier.
That's fair.
Yeah.
gotcha.
Man. So yeah, that's very off from what you had, Tom?
No, not very often.
Oh, okay.
I think it's not like exactly or anything by
totally.
any means, but it is like roughly, I think, similar. Same as the palaces. Our lists were like roughly similar,
Just
right?
like little things here and there, probably flipped.
Yeah,
Which of course is always going to happen.
Mine's not too. There's a couple I think that like one is a little bit lower and one's a little bit higher. But as you were saying, Barrett, when we decided, it is very much. I think it's fair to say, Tom, we liked all of the party. I don't think there was anyone we all hated.
There's no one I dislike, yeah.
Well,
really?
No, I'm kidding.
Maybe
I'm kidding.
my only thing, and because she's the new character, bringing up Samara, is that I wasn't into her when she was pretending to be her sister, and like in my first playthrough, where I was like, you kind of feel fake. I kind of don't believe you, and then it's weird that like that's kind of like what the plot was. Where I was like, oh, you were fake for a reason, and like in a story sense, I thought that was really cool. I don't love how much Royal tries to shove down your throat that you should date her, and especially like even if you do date her, I feel like how unrewarding it is in the main story it becomes, and it's very interesting like how that all plays out. I think her story is cool. I do think of like how it's interwoven gets a little clunky here and there. And then Akechi, I liked Akechi in base Persona 5. I adore Akechi in Royal. He is Kylo Ren done right in many ways, and he's the sweetest best boy who's a chaotic good who gets his redemption arc in this game, like helping y'all out and like literally laying down on the grenade and being like, yeah, I'm gonna die, and it's because like my morals are so like I'm not gonna like bend to anybody. So like, yeah, I would rather die than live under this dude's thumb, and I love that kind of added stuff along with his new confidant line and how they changed that, and being able to hang out with chaotic Akechi throughout an entire palace is just so cool. So
Yeah.
I think originally he probably would have been a B tier person, but his Royal editions definitely brought him up to S tier.
Yeah, I think if we were doing this for base Persona 5, Akechi would be lower on my list, and probably the general list we'll come up with. But Tom, I'm excited to hear you advocate for Yusuke at the bottom because it takes so long just to get him to be a friend.
Yeah, I mean, that is fair justification.
Yeah, it really is.
Someone's going to have to be at the bottom, but yeah.
We can talk about this more when we actually do this, but yeah,
Sure.
It is very funny, the journey of Yusuke, in that he like was my like I hated that character. I hated him. I actively hated him. And then about 2/3 of the way through the game, I realized that I didn't hate him. He was just a weirdo, and I actually loved him. And like that's a great journey.
Oh yeah.
Every friend group needs that weird artsy dude who's just super spaced out.
Yeah.
Who can't
Anyway,
afford anything.
I think we should give these people the time they deserve and spend a little more time on them to talk about this. I'm sorry for the tease at the beginning.
You need to take your time.
Yeah, exactly.
With them.
Take our time. I'm glad we spent as much time as we did on the palaces, though, because this was like a really good sort of recap, refresher, talking about those things, what we liked, what we didn't like, looking back at the game. So I'm very pleased. I hope y'all enjoyed it too. Let us know in the comments, of course, how you feel about each of the palaces, and which you liked and didn't like, and all that good stuff. We can do some quizzes before we go.
Yeah, let's do it.
I think. Okay, great.
I can start with a Persona pseudonym. I do also, before we leave, after the quizzes, I do have a review to read, and I do have it pulled up. It's not going to be me scrambling for a review and then can't find it. And it's actually very pertinent for this week. But anyway, Tom and Barrett, I think this one might be easy if you're able to pull into your mind palace and retrieve this information. But who is the Night Walking Warrior?
Night Walking Warrior?
Ooh. I think I got one. I think I got a guess. It's probably wrong.
I'm trying to see if I can pull up any hints.
You want my guess? It's probably wrong.
They are on the Death Arcana, if that helps. I'm just waiting to see if Tom has a guess or if he's gonna.
That actually might change my guess.
Yeah, they're on the death
I have
type.
one. No, that's wrong.
Or the death arcana. I feel like if I gave type and their skill, that might help. But let me know if you don't want me to.
Might be too much.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm at a loss for this one.
Okay.
Because I have one idea, but it's probably wrong.
Barrett, do you have a guess still, or are you?
It's wrong.
Okay.
My guess. The first thing that came to mind was Thor.
Okay.
But I know that's not correct, especially if they're the death. I don't think Thor is in the Death Arcana.
Barrett or Tom, what's your guess?
So night walking, I was trying to think of something sexual.
Yeah, that's fair for this game.
And so the only thing I could think of was incubus, but I think that's wrong.
It is. It is the McCoy.
Oh, McCoy! He's the little.
McCoy.
He's the
The green dude,
the green dude,
kind of
who looks
Gumby.
like Gumby.
Yeah,
yeah,
He's Gumby in a loincloth. Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, he
Not
is
sexual at all.
I mean, I don't kink shame, but yeah.
Fair enough.
That's the Night Walking Warrior. I wanted to pull back for like a very old one since
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah.
that's a good one.
according to the wiki fandom, again, just in terms of the amalgamation of things that Persona pulls in, the McCoy is apparently from the Australian mythology.
Huh?
Interesting.
So yeah.
Neat.
Anyway, Tom, do you have a pop
I
quiz
really
question for us?
appreciate how weird and wild they get.
Yeah.
Like, or not weird. Like
How into the weeds they
broad.
get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. They go very deep and very broad at the same time.
It's very impressive. Yeah.
Okay, so my quiz this week has to do with palaces. I did my best to make sure I got the numbers on this one correct, but I'm putting it to y'all. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right. We shall see. All of the palaces, except for with the exception of Mementos as a palace, have you go into them multiple times over the course of the game. So with the exception of Mementos, and because you only go into it technically once at the end, or only have to, you can obviously go into these palaces many, many times if you go many, many days.
For like story beat kind of stuff, right?
Yes, but for like forced entry, if you in completing the palace, go as few days as you possibly can, excluding Maruki's because you go 8,000 times in that palace. There are a few tied for least amount of entries, and a few tied for most amount of entries. So I'm looking for the palaces that you go into the least amount of times, and the palace that you go into the most amount of times. And I will give the hint, it's 3 each, as far as my count is.
Okay.
Interesting.
Okay.
So which ones do you go in? Which 3 do you go in the least amount of times, and which 3 do you go in the most amount of times? Is the question.
Okay.
This one, I really tried to triple check my numbers on this.
Yeah.
But it's a complicated thing, and that includes, just to be clear, that includes forced palace entries that are basically just like on rails cutscene things before the actual mission start date. It also includes going in for the boss fight.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. I'll have
And
an
again,
answer for you by next.
ignoring Mementos and ignoring Maruki.
Okay.
Because Maruki is like 7 or whatever.
yeah.
It's like,
something
it's
ridiculous,
nuts.
Yeah.
So that one is the obvious answer for actual winner of most and least.
Oh, yeah.
But we're looking for the others.
Okay.
Okay, that's my question for next week. You can let us know at Tom R. Marks. I'm at Tom R. Marks on Twitter. He's at JM Dornbush. And Barrett is...
Sad Boy Barrett on Twitter. And
There
you can
you
also
go.
go to youtube.com/Barrett Courtney, where you can see my character tier list ranking, my palace tier list ranking, and my music tier list ranking, where I ranked literally every song from Persona 5 Royal.
Wow.
Yeah. He also,
And
his
I
character...
thought...
Go ahead.
I thought doing a podcast for an entire year playing a single RPG was excessive.
And I did all of those in one video, and it's a 4-hour video.
Oh, my God. For reference also, because we were talking about this earlier, your character one is like every character. It's not just
every, I didn't do
names.
every, but it's like
Right.
every base game character, every royal character, and every striker's character. And I think even some of the like Persona Q characters, I didn't put every, like I just kept it to Persona 5 Royal. But yeah, that took me about an hour to do. The Palace one was really short. The Palace took me like a half hour, and the music one was like an hour and a half of me just like listening through every track.
Where does Jose go?
Let's see. Jose is at A tier where he belongs because he's a good boy.
Fair enough. You can also let us know your answers at youtube.com/Dornology, or you can go to email us at dornology@gmail.com. And yeah, please let us know what you think and go send Barrett some love, because we always appreciate having him here. He's been a staunch supporter of the show, and it's meant a lot. So.
And speaking of, we got a review on the Apple Podcast. Again, thank you to everyone who's liking, subscribing, giving the stars, wherever you're listening. We appreciate it. But this review came in a week or two ago, so apologies, I just noticed it. But this review says, "Hi guys, I just want to say how much I enjoy your Persona podcast. It's fun, in-depth, and scratches the urge for more Persona content. I love how you analyze the characters and story beats and reveal little secrets and details that I had no idea about, even after playing the base game in Royal a total of 4 times. I even love all the house jokes, despite never seeing an episode. I'm still catching up at the time of this review. I'm up to Size Palace and listen to episodes on my commute to work and while eating. Even then, I probably won't catch up in time for the grand finale, but I still wanted to say how much I love your content and hope you decide to go through Persona 4 Golden eventually. Keep up the great work." And a shout out to Barrett Courtney for just casually mentioning this podcast on PS I Love You. I would not have found this without him. So yes, Barrett, thank you, as always, for supporting the show.
Yeah, I always shout y'all out whenever I can on kind of funny content, because y'all are in the weekly rotation of like the 4 podcasts I actually listen to. So, and I adore listening to y'all every week. I'm sad that it's wrapping up soon. Like I can't believe it's almost been a year at this point.
It's wild.
And you know, it's crazy to think that my joke for the show is the longest spoiler cast ever is finally coming to an end soon.
Yeah, we've almost spoiled all the casts, so yeah, it's gonna happen soon. But yeah, thank you as always for the support, man, and for joining us this week.
Yeah,
thank you for having me.
We do have some more spoilers to talk about as we go, because there are still some things to happen and some, as Barrett hinted at, some twists that Jonathan might not see. You know what would be the best thing, like the best troll ever, is if there was a 10th palace that we just were.
I at the beginning of the episode, I was like, "How can we rank the palaces when we haven't gotten to the final one yet, guys?"
Yeah. I mean, that would be funny.
People keep asking me, and they're like, "So yeah, what are you guys doing for the wrap up?" I'm like, "We're just gonna follow the cutscenes as they happen. I think. I don't know. I could be wrong. Like, I'm pretty sure there isn't, but I don't know.
Just trust Tom's guidance. Tom's got
exactly,
you. He won't lead you astray.
No, he's led me well so far. Oh no, he gave me a look.
Anyway, that's about all the time we've got. Morgana is telling us to go to sleep, so we're gonna do that. As it is bright and sunny behind all
the darkness.
Anyway, this has been an absolute pleasure. Once again, I'm Tom, that's Jonathan and Barrett, and we'll see you next time.